in Africa. We're going to start with Mademoiselle Zoya Phan from Burma, who was forced to leave her home country at the age of 14 because her ethnic group, the Karen, were persecuted. She left her country for a refugee camp in Thailand. She spent a number of years in Thailand, and later on, at the age of 28, she left for the UK, and there she realized what the political situation was like in her home country and decided to become an advocate fighting for her country's struggle for democracy. So today she's going to talk to us about her experiences and her ideas on how matters could change in Burma. So I give her the floor before I go on to Mr. Tran Duc from Vietnam and Justina Mukoko from Zimbabwe. I now give the floor to Madame Zoya Phan from Burma.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to be speaking here today. First of all, I'd like to thank the UN Watch for this great opportunity for me to speak here at the Geneva Summit for Human Rights and Democracy. I can't tell you how much it means to me to be here and to speak about the situations in my homeland. Some of you here may already know about Burma, and I would like to explain briefly. There are two Burmas. One is where you see the democracy activists who are in jail, and you see leader of the democracy movement, Aung San Suu Kyi, and also Nobel Peace Laureate. And in 2007, when you saw monks were protesting and demanding for change, and many of them have been imprisoned and tortured and killed, and many of them are now in exile. And there is also another part of Burma, that is the Burma where I come from. I am from ethnic Karen, where for many decades my people have been under attack by the central government, their army attacking our villages, raping women, using rape as a weapon of war, using child soldiers, forcing our men to work for them as slaves, destroying thousands of villages, and displacing millions of people. And there are many other ethnic groups in Burma who suffer the same, like the Karen. Twice, I was forced to flee for my life. And the first time was when I was 14. And it was when the Burmese army soldiers attacked my village. I still remembered we were attacked with air bombs, air strikes, and mortar bombs. And each time the bombs dropped on the ground would shake. And as children, we were just so terrified. And we were very worried. We didn't know how we would survive. And we couldn't survive in the village anymore. And we had no choice but to flee for our lives. And we were hiding in the jungle before we reached to Thailand. And finally, we ended up in a refugee camp in Thailand. And life in Thailand was difficult as refugees. It was more like a prison camp where we were put, because we were not allowed to go out from the camp, and we got only basic supplies from NGOs. And the second time I was attacked was when I was 17, and it was when I did my final exams, and I was studying, and suddenly there was mortar bombed. And again, we had to flee for our lives. We had no choice. I could hear children were crying, and all the people were screaming, and everyone had to run for their lives. And again, we ended up in refugee camp in Thailand. Even in refugee camp in Thailand, we were chased and we were attacked by the Burmese army soldiers crossing the border into Thailand. Life wasn't safe for us, but I was very lucky when I was in refugee camp. I got scholarship and I studied in Bangkok, and then I got further scholarship. I studied in the UK, and now I'm based in the United Kingdom. Many people talk about change in my country at the moment. And of course, there are some changes, and these changes are welcome. And this can be positive developments if the Burmese military-backed government is going in the right directions. But we are concerned. The people of Burma are very concerned and cautious about the situation in our homeland. The military-backed dictatorships released few political prisoners in January, and then released some laws, and at the same time has put efforts to also sign some ceasefires with ethnic armed political parties. These are welcome, but when you look at the details of these initiatives, there is no much difference in the situation in my homeland. And also when you look at the situation on the ground, the human rights violations is still continue. And when we look at the release of some political prisoners, they are released conditionally with the Code 401. That means they can be arrested, rearrested at any time. And also the repressive laws that put them in jail at the first place remain in place. One of the monks' leader, Ukambira, who was released recently, he was rearrested again and then released and then rearrested again. That is because the repressive laws that put them in jail at the first place remain in place. And the dictatorship didn't acknowledge anything about these political activists, no compensation, no apology. And these political activists who have been released, they are still on the criminal record, which means they can't participate in the government sectors, or they couldn't have passport to travel around. And while the dictatorship in Burma is releasing few hundred political prisoners, they continue keeping hundreds of political prisoners in Burma. And on top of that, they also keep arresting people. One of the democracy leader who is part of the Karen resistance movement, Manye Mao, he was arrested and he's been charged with unlawful associations and Immigration Act. That's because of he is member of the Karen National Union, which is a pro-democracy resistance group and belong to the Karen ethnic in Burma. So how can we say there is genuine change in Burma? And while the military-backed government in Burma is allowing National League for Democracy, which is Aung San Suu Kyi's party, to register to the by-elections in coming April, at the same time, there remain other laws that make it very difficult for other small parties, especially ethnic parties, to participate in the elections. And combined with other laws like security laws and censorship, it makes it very impossible for the by-elections in April to be free and fair. And now, the dictatorship in Burma is talking about ceasefire with armed political ethnic groups. And we are very cautious about this, because what they do is only talking about ceasefire talk. They are not engaging in any political dialogue. There is no political process, no political dialogue in Burma at the moment. And we have seen from experience in the past many years, without political solutions, there can't be peace, truth, justice, and national reconciliations in Burma. And we know from experience, the dictatorship wants international legitimacy. They want sanctions to be lifted. They are releasing political prisoners. They are putting effort to have ceasefire agreement. And they are allowing the National League for Democracy to participate in the upcoming by-elections because they want international sanctions to be lifted. It's not because they care about democracy, about human rights, and because it is the right things to do. And the ethnic Kachin who are in the northern part of Burma, they have made it very clear in the past 17 years, they have had ceasefire agreements with the dictatorship with the hope that they would get political dialogue to solve the problem in Burma. And this political dialogue never come. Instead, it was the dictatorship that broke the ceasefire, attacking the Kachin Independence Army areas and committing human rights violations, raping women and killing civilians, and numerous human rights violations. That's why the Kachin are very insisting that we need political dialogue as the same as other ethnic groups in Burma. But the dictatorship is not interested in dialogue. They just want to have fake ceasefire, at the same time sending more reinforcements in ethnic area, continue their human rights violations, and showing to the international community that they are changing. Of course, we welcome some of the support that we receive from international community to press for change in our own homeland by putting pressure on the dictatorship. And there are some benchmarks put by governments, including the European Union, the US, Canada, Australia, and others. And let me tell you, there are two main problems with these benchmarks. The first problem is these benchmarks doesn't tackle the root causes of the problem. It only tackles the symptoms of the problems. For example, the release of some political prisoners. The repressive laws remain. And again, the ending armed ethnic conflict by having ceasefire. But there was no political dialogue. So the human rights violations still remain. And the second problem is none of these benchmarks has been met. And some of the European countries have already talked about releasing some sanctions. And we are very, very concerned about this. We know what is going on in the discussions at the UN and at the European Union. That's why we are here to warn the international community not to release sanctions too soon, as it is just start to work. I was in Burma 2 weeks ago. Of course, I went back there, sneaked across the border secretly, and I met refugees there and people who are in internally displaced area, who are hiding in the jungle, and people who are actively working for freedom in Burma. It was an inspiring trip for me to listen to what they have to say and to bring the message back. One of the main messages is that please tell international community that the situation with us here hasn't changed. The Burmese army soldiers are still in our village. We are afraid we can't go home yet. And it was true. Burmese army soldiers were still in many other places where I went there. And in fact, human rights violations committed by the Burmese army soldiers has increased in the past year. And international community didn't even take notice about this. They are just drowned by some of the small positive changes happening in central part of Burma, in Rangoon, in Naypyidaw, and other cities. So please, help the people in Burma. What the people in Burma want is a federal, democratic Burma where, regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our gender, our religion, everyone are equal and everyone are treated equally, where we enjoy our basic rights and freedom, where we are allowed to learn our own language freely, learn about our history, and practice our culture freely. And I know you can help us. And please continue to help us. Thank you.